Welcome back, folks, to a special edition of Chronics Cocktail Hour. We're broadcasting live from the Assembly Hall parking lot. We've got a special panel of guests with us this evening. On your left, from the Herald Times, beat writer, Yinzer extraordinaire, Dustin Dopirak.
Life is good.
Life is good. Pirates are in the playoffs and winning. We're also joined by Justin Albers, allhoosiers.com, IU student who's making a living and putting all sorts of great content out there. And on the right, his first time, as well as Justin's first time, Mr. Alex Bozich, founder, editor of Inside the Hall. How you doing tonight, gentlemen?
Very good.
All right.
As always,
It's a 7-1.
As always, I'm your host, Chronic Hoosier. Allow me to introduce myself.
That's incredible.
Happy Hysteria, bitches. How's it going?
It might as well be like Mountain Dew or something like that. Like that's.
You can test it to make sure that it's the real deal.
I'm certain it is. I have no doubts whatsoever.
Tastes like basketball season, guys. So let's start off. Hoosier Hysteria kicking off tonight. Let's start with Dustin. What are your thoughts going into this season? We got the former #1 team last year. Expectations are a little bit lower this year. What are the big things you're looking at heading into Hysteria?
I'm just interested to see how this team is going to play together and see what it's going to look like. I mean, you've heard so much about these guys, through recruiting and stuff like that, but you kind of don't have a great picture of what they look like. Even like last year's freshman, Yogi Ferrell, Hunter Bray, those type of guys. Indiana fans have seen those guys at AAU tournaments and stuff. A lot of these guys are going to be sort of new faces. It's going to be interesting to see what they look like together. I think they're going to be a really athletic team. I think the really big question is, are they going to be able to defend well? They have the raw material to defend really well, but they're going to be able to have to cause turnovers, not have breakdowns, get out in transition and score. I hope this is going to be a really efficient offensive team, because they don't have a lot of great established shooters, guys that have been there and made big shots. So they're going to have to get points different ways. They're going to have to get them in transition, and they're going to have to cause turnovers to do that. And I think the interesting thing is going to be to find out how good they are at that, how good they are just playing defense and communicating and those kinds of things.
Alex, what's on your radar starting the season off?
A lot of the same things Dustin mentioned, but I think one thing that stands out is, where does the perimeter shooting come from? We lost, obviously, two guys, Christian Watford and Jordan Holes, that were top 10 in the conference three-point shooting. You look at this roster, you got Will Sheehy, that's somewhat of a proven shooter, but beyond that, you don't really have a lot of proven shooters. I'm also looking to kind of see what the sophomores, besides Yogi Ferrell, kind of how they emerge. Connor Bray, Peter Jerkin, Jeremy Hollowell, what are they able to bring to the team? So those things, and also the freshmen. Obviously, Noah Vonleh is going to have a big impact, but what can they get from Stan Robinson, Luke Fisher, and Troy Williams when he comes back from the hand injury? I think those three guys are going to be important pieces as well. I think the depth is going to be better this year overall, just because I think you got more guys that are capable of playing. Obviously, top to bottom, they might not have as much talent, but you're going to have more pieces that I think they can contribute than you did a year ago.
Justin, if you had to take a stab right now, what would you place as our starting lineup for the first game?
Yeah, I've been asked that a lot of times. I think Yogi and Vonleh are locks, and Sheehy is as well, probably 2 or 3. Right now, I'll put Evan Gordon in at the 2, and Luke. I was gonna put Luke Fisher there, but with the injury, it's gonna be hard for him to be back and ready in time. So I'll put Connor Mascara-Bray in at the 5. Kind of pencil him in there for now, but I think long term, Luke Fisher is gonna be your starter in the middle.
I think Vonleh is going to play the 5. I think that's what's going to happen. The way this is going to break out, because I think they're going to want to play the best guys. And I think when that ends up happening, I think Hollowell is your 4. I think if it turns out to be that way, I think it's going to be a while before Fisher gets together. I don't get the impression, just from what Tom Crean has said so far, that Pereira's made the kind of strides you need to make to be there. I mean, I think obviously, we saw him, all the crazy stuff he did in AAU ball. We know there's a lot of potential there, but I don't think it's come out yet. I don't think they've reached the point where they feel steady about him in there. I think Vonleh certainly has the size. He's 6'10", 240. He's bigger than all the rest of those guys. I think Hollowell is a little bit more ready. Not a lot. I mean, he certainly doesn't sound like he's a consistent everyday guy yet. But I think the more likely scenario is you use Vonleh at the 5 and use Hollowell as the Watford forward. He's, kind of follows in those footsteps as we kind of figured he would.
How fluid you guys, let's go to you, Alex. How fluid do you think his starting lineup's going to be? Last year, we were pretty set in early on in the season as far as his traditional starters. Did we fluctuate at all?
I think it'll change quite a bit just as the season moves along. I mean, I can think of probably 7 or 8 guys off the top of my head that have a chance to start at some point throughout the season, maybe even more. So I mean, I agree with Dustin, the possibility of Vonleh starting the season at the 5. But kind of as it moves along, I think you could see, obviously, you know, Fisher and Perea maybe, you know, going back and forth as far as starting at the 5. And then I think even guys like Stan Robinson could find their way into the lineup at times. Troy Williams, Evan Gordon could go in and out. So, like I said, you know, last year he talked about having a starting 7 or 8. I think this year he actually may have a starting 7 or 8 in terms of kind of shuffling in and out just based on who's playing well, because you don't have the experience and you don't know what you're going to get from everybody on a night-to-night basis.
Last year he did talk a lot about his 7 starters, but often that was more indicative of we had a 7-man team. He didn't go very deep into the bench. How deep do you think the rotation goes this season?
I think minimum 9 players. Could go even more. I mean, I honestly think there's an opportunity for Colin Hartman and Austin Etherington, 2 guys we haven't mentioned, to carve out roles as shooters. I mean, because we talked about the perimeter shooters. You don't really have any of them. One of those guys is, if they can come in and make shots, they're gonna be able to kind of, you know, find some type of role on the roster. As crazy as that might sound for, you know, some of the guys in front of them, I think those 2 definitely have a shot to play as well.
There's a Matt Roth role to be had, I think. I mean, I don't think either one of those guys, you haven't seen from Etherington yet. Hartman's got at least a shot, like his, you know, technically it looks that good.
Yeah.
I don't think we've seen that kind of consistency from him in the AAU games and the high school games we've seen. But I think there's that role to be had, maybe even more so on this team, because I don't know, like you said, I don't know if there is that one shooter you can rely on and say, you know, that's going to be a 40-45% guy that's going to be able to hit big threes. He was a 35-36% guy last year. I think Farrell is a guy that hits maybe 38, 37. I don't know.
It's higher, yeah.
You need a guy that's going to be high percentage that you can just let get lost in the game, kind of like Roth did. Certainly these guys have more height, maybe athleticism. They can defend more players than Roth could, but I think that role is there to be had.
We've already heard him in the speech the other night use the word efficiency.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the key to last year's past 2 years. I mean, I was looking at the stats. I think Christian Watford shot over 50% in Big Ten play last year from 3-point land. I mean, I mean, you think about it. That's not something you're easily going to replace. And I mean, I think a big key for Indiana is kind of holding on to, you know, as much as they can from an efficiency standpoint and not falling off too far defensively as well. Because obviously the offense, being the top 5 nationally 2 years in a row, it's going to take some steps back. But how far it goes back, I think, is going to tell us a lot, kind of where this team's going to end up.
I think one thing that's good there, it's kind of good and bad, I guess. I remember a couple of years ago, it seemed like they had their best offensive team and their best defensive team, and they were 2 different groups of 5.
Right.
You know, that whether you had Jordy Hulse in there, or, you know, Watford or somebody like that, or if you had like Oladipo and Rivers or something like that, it seemed like there was sort of a 5 best defenders, 5 best offensive players, and they were sort of separate. And the last 2 years, that was less the case. You know, you certainly had you had to work around Jordy when he was out there, more or less. But, you know, when you had Oladipo and Sheehy out there, they were able to do both. With this group, I don't know that, you know, maybe with Hartman and Etherington, maybe that changes a little bit when they're out there. But I don't know that you're going to see a big difference. The guys who are players are guys that are offensive and defensive players. You know, Sheehy and Farrell, they're not great shooters, but they're going to be probably among your best offensive players, and they're certainly going to be your best defensive players.
Yeah.
From a productivity standpoint, we've lost probably as much as any team in the country, save maybe Kentucky. We may even have lost more as far as percentage of points scored, percentage of rebounds, 3-point shooting, across the board offensively. Kind of lost in that, though, is our defensive productivity, which was maybe one of the bigger gains this team had made in the last season from the year prior. Who on this team picks up the slack defensively going into it? And obviously we haven't had a chance to see these guys in open run yet. You guys all follow recruiting pretty well, so even the new players you've had a chance to see. Evan Gordon maybe being kind of the outlier there, that we haven't seen him in the AAU circuit for years now. If you had to pick one guy today, who do you think this team's lockdown defender is?
I think it's still Sheehy. I mean, I don't think there's not going to be an Oladipo on this team. I mean, there's not a lot of those guys, period. You do kind of have to really think back and remember what you saw him do last year defensively, and that's not easy to repeat. You just don't get one of those guys and say, okay, now you're Victor. Like, no, I mean, he had just his amount of energy, his athleticism, his length, his just ability to get up into guys, and also just the fact that he'd been there, he'd been defending, you know, the best perimeter player for a couple years, you know, or at least for a full season as a sophomore. Really learned what it takes to lock in on one guy and say, you're not beating me today. They don't have anybody who's necessarily done that. He's certainly done it in spurts, and I don't think he has necessarily the exact same skill set. He's certainly got a lot of length, you know, energy, ability. I mean, he can keep a lot of guys in front of him. I don't know that you'll see him do some of the stuff like what Victor did against Khalif Wyatt in Temple at the end of that game, or what he did against Trey Burke toward the end of those games. But I mean, I think if you're looking who is going to be your one guy that you're going to say, okay, you go take their best scorer, I think you still go with Will at this point. I think there are freshmen who have a chance to be that guy eventually, but they're going to be at ceiling what Victor was as a freshman. I mean, he still gambled too much. He had ability, you know, could get in somebody's lane and, you know, and cause turnovers and really heckle somebody, but he could also just get beat and be out of position by gambling too much. So that's what Stan Robbins and Troy Williams, that's what those kind of guys are going to be dealing with, I think, this year around. It might be a year or two before they can become anything like what Victor was.
Yeah, I mean, I think if he wants to be, Troy Williams could be that guy. I think he could develop into that guy. He has the tools, he has the athleticism, one of the more athletic guys Indiana's gotten in the last several years. So if he wants to buy in defensively, and I don't know that he does. I mean, Victor always talks about how he was a guy growing up, defense was all he could do, and that certainly hasn't been the case for Troy. He's been an offensive player at Oak Hill and before that. So I think he probably, out of the freshmen, has the best skill set to do that. Maybe Devin Davis does too.
That's something we haven't talked about.
Right, but I mean, if I had to bet right now, I'd say maybe Troy becomes that guy because, like Dustin mentioned, Will's a good defender, but he has limitations that some of these other freshmen don't have.
Well, this is probably an opportune point too. I want to take this moment and go ahead and copyright the hashtag Victor ain't walking through that door at the start of the season.
I like that one. There you go. Get it, Pat.
You can supplement Cody ain't walking through that door either. I think that's going to be a common theme this season for IU, is a lot of the things that we've got used to in the past, whether it's defensively, whether it's the offense running through the post, and the efficiency that enabled us last year. Because I think honestly that was one of the keys for our shooters' efficiency, was playing through the post with Cody in there. He attracted the attention, and it doesn't hurt that you have 4,000-point scorers on that team. Well, Cody being one of them, I guess. But some of the best shooters in IU history that he was able to distribute to. So yeah, Victor ain't walking through that door. Although tonight,
he might actually walk.
He may well be. What's the one thing that you're most intrigued about walking into tonight? Of all the question marks, and that seems to me, at least personally, this season is denoted by just question mark after question mark. Whether it is who's going to be the spot-up shooter, whether it's going to be who's this team's rebounder, who's the lockdown defender, who's the sixth man off the bench. With Sheehy coming, assuming that Sheehy's going to be a starter, who's going to be that guy that comes off the bench that really provides that spark that last year when Sheehy filled that role was really integral, and I think a lot of this team's success was being able to bring that energy off the bench. Tons of question marks going into it. From a personal standpoint, what intrigues you guys most this season? What question? What's the one thing that you're really looking at tracking and wanting to kind of see how it develops, maybe from a personnel standpoint?
All of them. I think it's the obvious question is, okay, the freshmen. You just want to see the freshmen and the sophomores. Like, who is Jeremy Hollowell and Hunter Perea become, and who are these six freshmen going to be? And that's obviously a pretty obvious way to put it. That's not a surprise to put it that way. But I think, just from having talked to Tom Crean and heard him at his speech the other night, to hear those descriptions and then see what that looks like. Actually in front of you. I think it was interesting to me when he called Stanford Robinson a very unorthodox player. We saw him a little bit at Derby Classic, and we've seen film of him, but I want to see what that means on the court. What does Tom think he's going to be? He's a guy that I find very interesting because I don't think there's not an obvious backup point guard on this team. And I think, when you kind of looked at the beginning, Stan Robinson looked like he might be that guy. Certainly before they got Evan Gordon, you had to look at him and say, okay, well, that's your favorite to be your two-guard, a guy that seemed, by all accounts can handle and shoot it a little bit. I'm interested to see what he really means. What is unorthodox? What stands out is just sort of weird about Stanford.
He shoots free throws underhanded, between the legs,
Most
just like
likely.
Ollie.
Yeah, exactly. Or he does it back behind the back. Could be one.
Kind of like Usain Bolt.
Yes.
Fuck it, why not?
Who cares?
Let's switch gears now. Obviously, there's lots to look forward to this season. But as Hoosiers are wont to do, especially this time of year, we're always looking ahead. Kind of find ourselves at a crossroad here lately on the recruiting scene. You guys do a hell of a job covering the IU basketball recruiting front. Last night, obviously, not unexpected, but still maybe some disappointing news regarding Good Luck. Where do you see this team going forward in the 14 class?
I'll let you take this one. You guys have been much more ahead of this game than I am.
We got the future on campus tonight. Who do you think's the next commit? Is he the only one for the 14 class? Does Tom cap it at that?
Well, Devin Robinson would be the obvious guy. I mean, that's really their best chance at another 2014 commit at this point. And I think they have a good shot at getting him. I don't know if they get him this weekend, but I'd say there's at least a better than 50% chance that they do. And then, I mean, I thought Good Luck was going to be part of this class, so I always kind of envisioned it as a three-guy class. And if you only get Devin Robinson, I just really don't see him capping at that. I see him trying to get 3 guys because, I mean, I feel like he wants to oversign every year. That's almost like a goal of his. So I think Devin Robinson will be the next guy, and I think they'll get somebody else after that. Who that will be, I don't really know.
We might not know until the spring. I mean, like Justin said, I mean, really right now it's just Devin Robinson is the main guy in play. Springtime can bring a lot of different things in college basketball, coaching changes, different developments. So I think at that point, Indiana could become more aggressive. And also, you can have guys leave the program, so that can give you a more defined look at kind of what spots are going to be available. But just kind of following up what he says on Robinson, that's kind of been one of the tougher situations to read just because the kid hasn't done any interviews, I don't think, since July. Justin and I both saw him at the NBA camp out in Charlottesville, Virginia in June. Really skilled kid, kind of like, he's 6'8", only about 165 pounds at this point. Kind of reminded me of Christian Watford in one ways, but he's got more guard skills. So he's a guy that I think you can bring in and probably put at the 3 right away, and he's an impact player that's getting better. Kind of, some guys, they're ranked in the top 10 as a freshman and they fall down the charts or level off. This kid's on the rise, so I think he'd be a great addition. But I think those are really, Robert Johnson and him are probably the only 2 that are possibilities to sign in the fall, I would say.
I think Blackman's still.
Well, yeah, Blackman too. Depending on,
a lot. I mean, obviously they're fighting. Obviously they're fighting some. They're fighting Kentucky. They're fighting Michigan, and probably some others. But I think it strikes me as interesting. That's the one that Tom has not given up on.
Right.
Like for all. Obviously Trey Lyles, when that thing ended, that thing exploded. I mean, that's not a good situation there at all. But Tom is very much hung in there with Blackman. And I think he looks at it as that is a situation that he still thinks can work.
Yeah.
Now, again, you put some of those contenders in there. I mean, I think for Blackman, it's almost like he already went to Indiana and graduated because he was there that long.
Right.
I mean, he was committed before Victor played a game, and Victor's career was over. And it's almost like Blackman was like already done the IU thing. It's like, okay, who's next? But he obviously still, and that I think says something about what Crean thinks about the kid. Not just as a player, but as somebody that he can work with, that he's sticking in there with it, and just at least still trying to fight it out. It doesn't seem like he backed off even when they got
Yeah,
dropped.
it's a smart thing to do to kind of hang in there. I mean, he's got 2 younger brothers that could eventually be recruited.
Absolutely.
His dad's a coach in the state.
The situation didn't
you
really
want to be in
end
Marion's
like the Trey
gym.
Lyles situation. So, I mean, from all accounts, a good kid, made a really early decision. So I don't blame him for kind of. I mean, obviously, fans would like to see him at Indiana, but if the kid wanted to do something else, better to do it now and kind of explore your options than when you're already on campus for a semester.
Well, taking a step back, what the hell is going on with Indiana's 14 class? We've now had the top 5 recruits in state decommit. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
The
Plus
top
the 6th.
5.
There's been 6 total that were junior all-stars in Indiana. Ernie Duncan as well, Bryant McIntosh, and then the 4 Spees kids.
So obviously, like the core 40 or whatever it is they're now teaching in Indiana high school, commitment is not part of that vocabulary section. What's going on with that? Is that the new reality for college basketball? Is that something unique to this class? I think with IU's case, you could probably argue the point that, it's taking early commits, kids who've never played a game in high school, which interestingly, if you're going to commit to one of the worst teams that this school has ever fielded, ride with them all the time and then dump them after they've, spent more weeks at number one than any other team in the country. It's just a lot of oddity going on. Is this just the new reality? Do kids just not appreciate that?
I don't think that's the case. I'm trying to we got to be a little bit political about this, but there's 4 guys in the same team, and I don't want to say that. I mean, they're not bad kids. There's nothing, like wrong with them as kids or whatever, but I think each of their recruitments is kind of playing into the other. I think the fact that, and I think Trey Lyles even mentioned it when he decommitted the first time, that like he saw what Trayvon Blewett and Jaquan Lyle being recruited, and then he was like, I want to see what that's like. And I think Blackman did that over time. I think if you'd have seen Blackman commit as a junior or something like that, I don't think he would have seen that. But I think he just saw like 4 years of like, wow, isn't this cool? And maybe I do want to check this out. But I think they all, because they're close. I mean, it's a tight group of kids. The 4 of them. I mean, I think one of them. I think when Trayvon decommitted the other night, I saw Jaquan Lyle say something about like listed all 4 of them on Twitter and was like, I'm going to ride with you until the wheels fall off or something like that.
Yes.
And I mean, it's just that group. I think they've just been so very invested in each of their recruitments, and I think it's I don't know, it's just built a weird dynamic, and I think that's fueled most of it. I think at least I think the other 2 cases are separate. Certainly Bryant McIntosh end up in a much better situation, really blew up, really kind of expanded his own, kind of looked out there, saw what, that there was a lot more out there for him than just playing for an NBC team, and all of a sudden he's going to, to the Big Ten. And I think he could have, if he waited out longer, he might have even been in better shape. And I think that's more of a standard situation. I don't think this speaks to a grander situation in college basketball. I think it's just a kind of a specific situation they're talking about for guys.
Yeah, but I think it could be a grander situation in that more these days than before, kids almost want to play with their friends. I mean,
yeah,
I don't think we saw that too much before, and I haven't been involved in it too much, so I can't speak that far back, but it seems like now more than ever, kids want to go to college with their friends, or at least want to consider that as a possibility, and so they almost want to be recruited, or at least consider a package deal, and I don't think we've necessarily seen that much before, and I think we're going to continue to see that more.
That is the AAU thing. I mean, and that's not necessarily, in terms of what difference that makes in kind of the higher reaches in basketball in general in the United States. I don't know that that's a really bad thing overall. I mean, I think, this point has been made, I think, that it's actually sort of helped, like, USA basketball. I think that's part of the reason why Team USA has kind of got it together. Like, they are friends with these people because they started playing against them when they were 16, 17. Some were on the same AAU team, some just saw each other at the same tournaments. There's more fraternizing going on among high school kids now. It starts early, and this is maybe a bad side effect of that they're trying to all fit in one place, and it matters to them where, in the old days, if you were the best guy in your high school team, well, most likely your second best guy, he might be your best friend, but he might be going to play NAIA, or something like that, if you were far and away the better guy. And, maybe if you had 2 really great high school kids on the same team, you had this issue. But in this case, when you're building these super AAU teams, you're having that almost every year. It is a constant thing that these guys do want to play with their friends. I think you're right.
Plus, you never know in these situations. You hear so many different things. A lot of it's stuff that's, can't be passed on for whatever reason, can't verify stuff. But, there's so many different layers now. You've got the AAU team, you've got the high school team, you've got the parents, you've got the friends, you've got the random person that could be approaching these kids at AAU event. I mean, you've got all these different. Social media is so much different. I mean, and you got to remember, these are kids, so they're easily influenced. They make decisions that adults may look at as permanent, as not so permanent. So I agree with Dustin. I don't really view it as a problem in college basketball. I just view it as kind of an evolving world that these things are gonna. It's kind of an odd year overall, but I don't view it as maybe like a large problem on a scale that any larger than this class.
So to paraphrase, you guys are just saying don't recruit Speece kids and expect them to stick. That's the message here. Those are my words, obviously, not these guys.
I can go ahead and own that one.
I will own that entirely. Looking beyond the 14 class, there's a lot in the pipeline. The question is do you guys, how confident are you with the pieces we already have in place, the developmental potential, the ceiling that our current roster has. Let's assume that we get, let's say we fill in one more, and let's say that for some crazy reason Crean doesn't oversign in the 14 class.
He doesn't believe in not oversigning. Let's be serious.
Is it even possible? Can he go a year without oversigning?
I don't know. I mean, I think he'd have like withdrawals or something like that. He just like literally like walk out to the next day. You were gonna just you.
Is it too early to speculate on who the next man out would be in the event that we do oversign? There's certainly the possibility that Vonleh goes one and done.
That seems real to me. I mean, that seems real. There's no doubt. Keep going.
Yogi, he honorable mention All-American. Without the playmakers we had on last year's roster, there's certainly some potential for him on this team. Do you think, as far as keeping the Hoosier faithful in the fold, let me go a different direction. Tom had a lot of momentum at the end of the 13 season, and it kind of ended abruptly in D.C. I was there for it, had a pretty close seat right next to Luke Skywalker. Made it about the most miserable experience of my life. For those of you who aren't familiar, the rapper, what's Luke? 2 Live Crew, Luke Skywalker. He's got a real name, I don't know. He's a Miami guy. Luther Campbell, thank you, Dustin. As nasty as he wants to be.
Yes.
I'd finagled some seats in the Miami section after they got beat, and happened to be in the same section as Luther Campbell and Edgerrin James. Luther Campbell's a horrible individual, but horrible individual. Cussed me, called me everything but a white guy. And it just made one of the worst nights of my life exponentially worse, because he had an entourage that probably was packing heat and would kill me. But it certainly took a lot of air out of the sails heading into this season. And obviously you guys are professionals. I'm more of the fans' point of view here. Common sentiment among a lot of the fans, though, is we've kind of lost some of that momentum, and a lot of people are a little anxious to see if we're going to be able to keep what we do have. Obviously, we're picked to finish somewhere around 5th, 6th in the conference. One of the questions floating around right now is if the best Crean can parlay out of a Sweet 16 run, 2nd year in a row, and putting 2 guys in the lottery as a number 42 pick, maybe the 20th, not 42 pick, 40th ranked player, maybe the 20th. Is this sustainable for him under the current trajectory? We've kind of transitioned from his earlier years, where it was really organic. We were using a lot of the local products. We were deeply invested in the Indiana Elite program, as well as throughout the region. Now we've kind of transitioned into this national recruiting scene at the elite level, but it hasn't really panned out as maybe some folks would have hoped for, and expectations often detached from reality. That's a whole other question. But is this sustainable from a momentum standpoint? Till we get to the 15 class, till we get to the 16 class, where do you guys see this thing going? It seems to be kind of a program in flux right now. It's like we're back. We're kind of done printing those T-shirts. We are officially back, but maybe we're not there yet. I mean, it's like we're in the door with one foot. Do you see what we have on the shelf right now getting us to that next level, where we are permanent elite, where it's no longer subject to question or even doubt? I think this is where Jameson starts to influence the questioning, so let's keep that in mind as well.
I think one thing that, and this kind of hit me last night, and when the good luck decision came out, and there was a lot of reaction, negative for whatever, obviously a kid doesn't come and people, give their opinion, not pointing any fingers, but
raise his hand.
But just, I think you got to remember also that they just signed 2 top 10 classes in a row. They've got a top 45-ish kid already committed. I think just kind of have to let it play out and see what happens. Obviously, this roster for this season is set. It is what it is. Mm-hmm. The season's going to play out how it is. There's a possibility. Even if you bring in Devin Robinson and Robert Johnson, that's still 2 really good players. Devin Robinson's got McDonald's All-American potential. They're in really good shape in 15 with a lot of kids. So I don't think it's time to hit the panic button just yet. I think they've got a lot of good players in the program right now that are going to need to develop. But when you lose 4 1,000-point scorers, that's a pretty significant thing to overcome. So, as long as the season goes as most people believe it will, 4th or 5th in the Big Ten, reasonably decent NCAA seed, I don't think the momentum has really been knocked off path as much as people might like to think when bad news comes.
You know, let me interject there too. You talk about those last night revelations. By the time I finally decided to step away from the Twitter machine, I also had that revelation that up until this point, the most disappointing class in the Tom Crean era, as far as public perception, was Oladipo and Sheehy. Remember everybody saying, "Who are these no names? Nobody's heard of them. They're barely on the charts," and they turn out to be maybe one of the most influential classes Tom Crean's ever brought in.
Yeah.
So there's maybe that element of it too. So
I think, as far as, you know, is it sustainable? Is it, you know, how are the fans going to react to all this? It's a very big turning point year for this reason. I think both Crean and the fan base, and just generally everybody around it, has to figure out a way to just deal with the fact that you're no longer on just a straight rise trajectory, you know, and that happens. I mean, it's college sports. You don't get to just keep building on what you have. You only have 4 years with every class, and then there is a little bit of a start over, you know, sort of every time. I mean, like, there's the cyclical nature of college sports doesn't allow you to continue on a straight up trajectory forever. So now that it's sort of, you saw sort of the peak of it, you know, that doesn't mean that's the highest they're ever going to get, but then the notion of, okay, you know, now we've got as much as we were going to get just going straight up, you know, with that momentum from just the rebuild. Now you kind of get into a groove with it and say, okay, well, where are you going to be year to year? And it's sort of like you know, the fan base has to get used to having Tom Crean around, and Tom Crean's got to get used to what the expectations are going to be, and how to handle that, and how to deal with maybe a team that isn't all there right now, that is young, that has potential, but is not going to be able to be what you had last year right away. So that's kind of the interesting point, I think, is that I think it's sustainable. I think he's capable of continuing to get players when he's not just on that high, just on that, again, straight up trajectory. I think he's still going to be able to get talent and still win. Now, when does a title come, and is that what Indiana is going to hold him to? You know, if it's another 4 years, 5 years before you're really talking about a championship team again, I don't know. I mean, I think he's going to be able to get players. I mean, I don't know. You don't know how this is going to break. I mean, certainly it'll be, if Vonleh is a one and done, then you're building an entire team around 40s and 50s guys, somewhere in that vicinity, 30s to 50s, which isn't bad. You've seen championships built on that, you know. Oladipo and Sheehy were not even, you know, were
140s.
We're both 140s. So, I mean, you never know how that's going to break. I mean, I think they're going to be, if they stick with Green, I think they're going to win for a long time. Now, when does it get going back on that trajectory again? And you're looking, okay, we're thinking title again, either this year or next year. You know, like, I think Indiana will certainly want that again quickly, want to have that feeling again, like, this is imminent in the next couple of years, whether it's this year or next year. You know, they're going to want that fast. It's like, how long can you sort of go back to the high middle of the Big Ten and just be happy being a tournament team, happy winning a game or two, before you're demanding again, before you're expecting a title, before this isn't moving fast enough. That's going to be the interesting question: is how does Crean get back into that? Get back on that track, and how do fans do if it's a year or two or three before you start seeing it head that way?
Speaking like only in terms of recruiting, I don't really think they've lost momentum there either. I mean, they're not back to recruiting those Sheehy Oladipo types in the 100s. I mean, they're still going for elite prospects like Devin Robinson. They still beat a Nike program in North Carolina. Yeah. Robert Johnson pretty much stole him from there. That's 2 in 2 years if you include Troy Williams from a Nike program.
Not just Nike program though. You're talking Jordan brand.
Right.
You're talking flagship, and that's what scares the shit out of me every time we recruit a kid Carolina's after. The sway of having Michael Jordan's alma mater on you. You know you're going to have MJ, you're going to meet Michael Jordan. You're going to have the custom, all the Jordan brand stuff. And somehow Tom's eating Roy's lunch on the recruiting trail.
Cody Zeller.
Troy.
Noah Vonleh. And then now Robert Johnson.
Yeah.
I mean, just to parlay on the recruiting stuff, I mean, just because you get the #1 class doesn't mean you're going to be a great team. See Kentucky last season, which completely imploded. I mean, I think there's something to be said also for building a team with around 3 or 4 year players and then supplementing it with a McDonald's All-American every year, which is kind of what they've done. I mean, you look at Zeller, he was McDonald's All-American, Yogi, and now Vonleh. I mean, you
had 3 of them in 3 years. I mean,
yeah.
I don't think any other Big Ten program at this point has brought in a McDonald's All-American 3 years in a row. So, I mean, obviously.
So does that mean we're the new Ohio State? Excelling at a high level early on, except underachieving on a consistent basis. Is that fair?
I'm not sure I would call last season underachieving, though. Just from the standpoint of they won the Big Ten.
It's a bad matchup. Let's admit,
Right.
the tournament was a terrible matchup for us. We got two guards that are 6'0" against one of the longest teams in the NCAA.
Yeah.
All right, let's transition here before I get you guys in trouble, because Lord knows I like to plant those seeds. And you guys have a job to do tonight. Looking ahead, how many wins this season, Dustin?
22.
22.
Regular season or?
Regular season, I think 22. I think that was what I came up with.
Where do you think we finish in the conference?
5th. I mean, I think, I don't know that, they'll lose maybe 1 or 2 non-conference games, but I think 4th or 5th.
How many teams do you think the Big Ten puts into the tournament this year?
7? 6, 7?
Justin, same questions to you.
Give me 7.
What's the record?
20 wins, 6 in the Big Ten, and 7 teams from the Big Ten in the tournament.
Alex?
I've got 22 wins as well, and I'll go with 5th behind Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin.
It's right. It's them and Iowa. I think that's the flip one.
I think they'll beat out Iowa.
Who's the MVP at the end of the season for this team?
Noah.
Yogi.
Who's the biggest surprise player, the breakout player of the year? Alex.
Devin Davis.
Troy Williams.
Surprise is Devin Davis. I think there's 2 different answers here. The breakout player is Troy Williams. The surprise is Devin Davis because no one's talking about Devin Davis. I think people are expecting Troy Williams to break out.
For me, I'm going to say it's the evening of a Hoosier Hysteria. I've drank 16 ounces of whiskey. This team's going to run the table. Undefeated national championship. MVP is going to be Tijon, #1 seed. Banners, bitches. That's my pick right now. I might have to reconsider later on, though.
The MVP is always Tijon.
The MVP is always Tijon. Tijon is the answer to every question. And to Avi, the winner of the cage match, look at Dustin's physique. You know this. He's going to whoop ass. Nevertheless, I want to thank you guys all for joining us. Our special guest out of frame, Jordan Littman, also with Inside the Hall. Another phenomenal IU student who is just doing wonderful things for Alex. Mike Glasscott in the corner here. Nevertheless, thank you guys for joining me tonight. I really appreciate you taking your time. Let's go make some money in there and let's go watch some Hoosiers. You guys have a great night. As always, this is Chronic Hoosier. We'll catch you guys later. Have a good one.